Hello, fight fans, and welcome to another edition of Monday Night Fight Talk. I am your host, Dylan Brewski. Thank you so much for joining me today on this beautiful Monday. It is very, very hot here in Washington State. I don't know about where you guys are, but we got about 90 degrees where I'm at, and it is not pleasant. I don't like this hot weather, but we also have a very hot show today. There is a lot to get to. We have Bellator 282, Bantamweight Grand Prix. The semifinals are set. Plus, we had a change of championship, gold in the middleweight division. So I'll be going over that. Plus, in PFL, we had 3 different weight classes get their playoffs set in stone. So that was a big deal. We had UFC Fight Night, Tsarukyan versus Gamrot, which was headlined by an absolute crazy main event. This main event was wild all across the board, all 5 rounds that it lasted. Plus, we have predictions for UFC 276, the pay-per-view coming up here on Saturday, July 2nd. That is going to be absolutely nuts also. But we need to get right into this right now. Bellator 282, Magomedov versus Enrique Barzola. This was an incredibly fun fight. Both guys had huge moments in this fight, and it seemed like it was an incredibly close matchup, but contrasting styles. Magomedov was terrific on the feet. His striking was absolutely phenomenal. Enrique Barzola, especially in the first 2 rounds, was absolutely amazing, landing all of his takedowns. I believe it was 5 in total in the first 2 rounds that he was able to land. But Magomedov was able to get back up in every single situation, and that was kind of the story of this fight. Is Enrique Barzola was able to get him to the ground, but he wasn't able to keep him on the ground. He wasn't able to dominate him on the ground. Magomed was able to get back up every single time, except for the last takedown that Barzola got, because Magomed was able to sink in the guillotine choke in the 4th round, move on to the semifinals of the Bantamweight Grand Prix. Then the other Grand Prix matchup, Leandro Higo versus Danny Sabatello. This fight was not close at all. Danny Sabatello looked absolutely amazing in this fight. He was completely dominant across 4 rounds of this fight. Really, the ground and pound, the constant pressure, Higo just could not get anything going, except in the 2nd round. He was able to get a reversal. He was able to get some ground and pound going. He was able to get Sabatello's back, tried to get the rear naked choke, but he was not able to do so successfully. After that, everything went Sabatello's way. He completely dominated the rest of the fight. So Sabatello moves on to the semifinals. So that means the semifinals match will be interim champ Rafion Stotts versus Danny Sabatello, and then we have Patchy Mix taking on Magomedov. I haven't seen if they've announced when that will happen, so I'm not 100% sure, but hopefully soon. I know that whoever wins this will be the interim bantamweight champion, as Rafion Stotts is the champ right now. So if he gets beat at any point, the title changes hands to whoever beats him, and so on and so forth. Whoever wins this will be the interim bantamweight champion. But speaking of championships changing hands, Gegard Mousasi loses his title to Johnny Eblen. This was an absolute domination on Eblen's part. I mean, he dominated this in every aspect. Gegard Mousasi should have had a huge advantage on the feed, but Eblen showed humongous strides to improve his striking. He was amazing with his striking. He was able to get the fight on the ground at will. He seemed like he just had a endless gas tank that he never got tired. He was completely dominant in this fight. Ended up getting a decision victory, very easy. All three judges scored at 50-45, so he didn't even give up a round. Johnny Eblen, huge props to him. He was amazing in this fight, and now he gets championship gold in the middleweight division. But that's all I really had to go over with Bellator 282. Now we'll move on to PFL that happened also on Friday. There was only one fight in the lightweight picture, as all the other fights in the lightweight weight class were last week. But this one had humongous implications. Stevie Ray needed a finish that was faster than Raush Manfio had. And he was facing the number 1 seed and UFC veteran, legend of the MMA game, Anthony Pettis. And he came in and did exactly that. He was able to get this crazy inverted body triangle. It sounds like he might have injured Anthony Pettis, like injured his ribs. Obviously not intentionally, but with the submission hold that he had. And he did that in the second round. And Manfio was only able to get his in the third round. So Stevie Ray actually moved into the 4th seed. So the lightweight bracket breaks down like this for the playoffs. It's a rematch for the 1 versus 4. Anthony Pettis is still the number 1 seed, getting that first round finish in his first fight. He takes on Stevie Ray, the 4 seed, who just beat Anthony Pettis. And then we also have Olivier Aubin-Mercier versus Alexander Martinez. They are the 2 and 3 seed, as they both got 2 decision victories in their first 2 regular season fights. But that was the only lightweight fight for that entire card. But we did figure out both the featherweight and the heavyweight divisions playoffs. Starting off with the featherweights, last year's runner-up Chris Wade will come in as the number 1 seed after defeating 2-time champ Lance Palmer about a month or 2 ago, and getting the first round finish over Kyle Bochniak, giving him 9 points. The number 2 seed Ryoji Kudo avenged his loss in his first fight due to an accidental headbutt with Brendan Loughnane that resulted in a huge cut. He couldn't go back. He couldn't go on the rest of the fight, but the fight was far enough into it that they were able to go to a technical decision. So there was still a decision in that fight where Ryoji Kudo did lose that fight, but he was able to get a first round KO victory over Alejandro Flores and secure the number 2 seed. Coming in with the 3 seed is Bubba Jenkins. He is 2-0. He had 2 decision victories over Kyle Bochniak and Reynaldo Exon. And then rounding it out with the 4 seed, Brendan Loughnane. Like I said with Ryoji Kudo, he got the technical decision, and then he also got a decision victory over Ago Husick. So that will lead to Chris Wade, number 1 seed, facing 4 seed Brendan Loughnane, and Ryoji Kudo versus Bubba Jenkins in the 2 versus 3. And now for the big boys, the heavyweight division also figured out their full playoff picture. Coming in with the number 1 seed, Denis Goltsov comes in with a first round TKO victory over Cody Goodell in his first fight, and then he got an absolute dominant decision victory over Maurice Green, rounding him up to 9 points, and the number 1 seed. Number 2 seed, 2021 runner-up in the heavyweight division, Ante De La Hoya, also coming in with 2 wins, getting a second round TKO victory over Mathis Scheffel in his first fight, and a decision victory over Shelton Graves. Number 3 seed, Raynon Ferreira, gets in because of his first fight, getting the first round finish over Jamel Jones, though he did lose his second fight to Klidson Abreu. And rounding out the number 4 seed is the reigning champ, Bruno Capolosa. Kind of the same situation as Raynon Ferreira. He got a first round finish in his first fight over Stuart Austin, but also is coming off of a loss in his second fight to Mathis Scheffel. So that will lead to Denis Goltsov taking on the defending champ Bruno Capolosa in the 1 versus 4 matchup, and Ante De La Hoya versus Renan Ferreira in the 2 versus 3. So really looking forward to that. We do have one more week of second regular season fights with the welterweights and the women's lightweights coming up this Friday. So very excited for that one to get the full playoff picture for PFL coming up. And then I believe like beginning of August, mid-August is when they will start the playoffs. But that's really all I have for PFL. That's all I have for Bellator. Now it's time to get to the UFC. UFC Fight Night, Tsarukyan versus Gamrot. Absolute crazy main event. But it also started off very, very interesting. Vanessa Demopoulos versus Jinyu Fry. This was a very interesting fight that led to a very interesting decision. In reality, from what I saw, I thought Jinyu Fry won the fight. She outstruck her opponent and landed at a higher rate. She was incredible against the takedown, only letting Demopoulos getting 1 of 7 takedowns. And, I mean, I guess Demopoulos did get a lot of clinch control time, and apparently 2 of the judges liked that. I personally would have given it to Jinyu Fry, but I could see why Demopoulos did get the fight. But I will say one judge scored it 30-27 Demopoulos. I think that's absolutely insane. I don't think that there was any judge that could vote 30-27 on either side. If this would have happened for Jinyu Fry, I would have been kind of shocked, because this was an incredibly close fight, but I don't see the 30-27. But nonetheless, it was a very highly competitive fight, very fun fight to watch, and congratulations to Demopoulos for getting that victory. Next up, Brian Kelleher versus Mario Batista. A fairly short, dominant fight on the side of Mario Batista. He basically just dominated it with his grappling, landing both of the takedowns that he attempted. And on the second one, he was able to get his back and sink in the rear naked choke and get the win over a veteran who has faced a lot of guys. He's always down to fight anybody, but Mario Batista did get the best of it in this matchup. And then we had JP Bays versus Cody Durden, another short fight, but also another domination. This one for Cody Durden, who took advantage of JP Bays' it seemed like lack of striking defense, landing 34 of 41 total strikes. And I mean, he was able to get the TKO victory in just over a minute. So Cody Durden also landed over 30 strikes in a minute. JP Bays just didn't. He looked completely outmatched. I heard somebody said that he has gotten knocked down 8 times in his last 3 fights. So I don't know if it's a chin issue, but Cody Durden did look very impressive in this fight, and he got the TKO victory. Next up, we have Rylan Paiva versus Sergey Mazarov. This was a very close fight. Morozov definitely was the better and more active fighter on the feet, but Paiva did have tremendous takedown defense. Absolutely tremendous. Morozov only landed 2 of the 13 takedowns that he attempted, but ultimately he did enough to win. Paiva just wasn't active enough on the offensive side of things, which was actually something that I was a little worried about going into this fight. So, I mean, you got to be a little bit more active than what he was on the offensive side of things if you do want to get the win. I do agree that Mazarov just was more active. He wasn't crazy. It wasn't like a complete domination, but he just was the more active fighter, and he got the win because of it. And that takes us to Shaylin Nordenbecky versus TJ Brown. I gotta say, I underestimated Shaylin because he looked absolutely fantastic in this fight. TJ Brown had some bright moments, attempting a few submissions, but that was more out of desperation, trying to get reversals, but he also did get a few reversals. So he had some bright moments, But at the end of the day, Nordin-Becky was just better in this fight. He landed half the takedowns he attempted, landed over 70% of his strikes, and got the decision victory because, yeah, like I said, TJ Brown got a couple reversals, but so did Shaylin. So, I mean, they kind of evened each other out there. Very, very impressive fight for Shaylin, who, like I said, he has a ton of professional experience, and he's only like 25. So very impressive for him to come in like that to the UFC, but very excited to see where his career takes him after that victory. And that leads us to the premier prelim of the night, Carlos Ulberg versus Tafon Chukwi. Another quick fight with Carlos Ulberg coming out on top with a flurry of strikes to beat Chukwi. But one thing I do want to point out is really cool to see all the other guys from his native country, Israel Adesanya, Alexander Volkanovski, Brad Riddell, there to support him too. They were all pumped up, cheering for him, standing up, all that. It was super cool to see guys that are their caliber. I mean, we're talking about two champions, another ranked lightweight, who are all fighting next weekend at UFC 276, there to support one of their up-and-coming fighters from that country. So really cool to see that. And that leads to one of my favorite fights of the night. If the main event didn't happen, this probably would have been my favorite fight. Chris Curtis versus Rodolfo Vieira. Oh my God. Chris Curtis defended 20 takedowns in this fight. Rodolfo Vieira, a jiu-jitsu specialist, a great grappler, was 0 for 20 on takedown attempts. That's insane. 20 times? But I do have to give Rodolfo credit. The takedowns weren't working. His striking was much improved. It was insanely improved. Granted, he didn't win this fight by any means. It wasn't close. I wouldn't say it was like a domination, but it also wasn't close. Everybody knew who won at the end of the fight, but Rodolfo really did hold his own. He just wasn't better than the striker, Chris Curtis, but that was definitely the best striking we've seen from Vieira. Ultimately, though, Chris Curtis is the better striker. He had tremendous takedown in defense. Perfect takedown defense, I might add. And he was able to get a hard-fought win. I saw he tweeted yesterday that he wants to know if anybody saw the bus that hit him. That's how much pain he was in after that fight. So huge props to both of these guys. They were both warriors, but especially Chris Curtis for extending his win streak to 8, keeping the momentum going from last year with his insane 6 fights that he had in 2021. That leads to Nate Maness versus Umar Nurmagomedov. Now this right here was a complete domination. Nate Maness didn't stand a chance. That's no disrespect to him, because he's actually a really good fighter. I came on here last week and said Nate Maness is Umar's toughest test to date, and Umar made him look silly. He dominated on the ground. He was able to, he only landed 3 takedowns in this fight, because once he took him down, Maness didn't get back up. He didn't even come close to getting back up. Relentless ground and pound, and then Umar also looked like he had much improved striking. He was, and phenomenal kicks. That like weird push snap kick that he had, that was crazy. He had the judges going crazy. He had me going crazy. It really seemed like nobody had seen a guy like Umar, a great wrestler, a great grappler, do a kick like that. That was very impressive. I would not be surprised if we see a ranking by his name very, very soon. It could happen after this fight happened, but I do expect him to have to do one more fight if he gets that win, especially in the fashion that he just did. He should have a ranking next to his name very, very soon. That leads to Thiago Moises versus Christos Gallegos. only a 3-minute fight. It wasn't very crazy. But at the same time, like, Giagos did not look that bad in this fight. Usually when you get like a 3-minute fight, it's usually one guy completely dominating the other. But, I mean, he didn't look too bad in this matchup. But at the end of the day, Moises Jiu-Jitsu is just too good. Hopping on the back of Gallegos, getting the standing rear naked choke. So very, very impressive for Thiago Moises to get the victory in that one. And that leads to Josh Parisian versus Alan Badeau, a big old heavyweight matchup. Kind of surprised the fight lasted as long as it did. And I'm glad they stopped it because both of these guys were completely gassed. They had absolutely nothing left in the gas tank, but a big win for Josh Parisian. And that leads to the co-main event of the evening, the veteran, the guy who is always down to fight anybody, lives up to that name. Neil Magny takes on the up-and-coming undefeated prospect with a 100% finish rate, Shavkat Rakhmonov. And the biggest takeaway from this fight, if you didn't think Shavkat was the real deal, you better have changed your opinion after that. This guy is the real deal. Neil Magny, I can't remember the last time I saw him get beat like that. It's been a very long time, and it was probably against a very, very good fighter. Shavkat was near perfect in this fight. He was able to get the guillotine submission victory at the very, very end of the second round and continue his winning streak of being undefeated, going up to, I believe it's 16-0. It's 15 or 16-0 now. And a 100% finish rate. He was, again, near perfect in this fight. It was very, very impressive to see what Shavkat did. And that leads to the main event, Arman Tsarukyan versus Mateusz Gamrot. This was one of the most even fights in terms of skill level between two guys. This fight was nuts. It didn't seem like either could get a dominant position, and if they did get that dominant position, it was for like 2 seconds. And then the other guy was getting up, getting out of the way, doing this, doing that. This was so impressive on both sides of this fight. If I was the UFC doing these rankings, I know a lot of people don't agree with them, including myself, with like Conor McGregor, Tony Ferguson being ranked above these guys. I would not be angry if they moved both of these guys above Tony Ferguson and Conor McGregor. After that fight, it was absolutely insane what happened in this fight. I'm fairly surprised that none of the judges gave the fight to Tsarukyan. Especially the fourth round. I actually thought he won that fight, but I do understand, or won that round, which in turn would mean that he did win the fight because he won rounds 1 and 2. But I do understand Gamrot did get a couple takedowns, and I can see how the judges gave the round to Gamrot. But just an incredible fight. This fight was amazing from start to finish. These guys left everything on the line. And I think both of them are future title contenders, and I can't wait to see where both of them go. That is all that happened with that great fight night card. So we should move on to some fight predictions. UFC 276, an absolute stacked pay-per-view card, prelims card, early prelims card. I mean, this is stacked from top to bottom. Usually, I feel like a lot of the pay-per-views lately have been like, at least on paper, there's like 3 main fights and then there's a lot of unranked matchups. We have unranked matchups, or ranked versus ranked matchups everywhere on this card. It's absolutely insane. We have legends going at it. We have 2 title fights. It's going to be absolutely insane. A middleweight number 1 contender fight, basically, from the sounds of it. But to start the night off, we have Jessica Rose Clark versus Julia Stoliarenko. A very intriguing matchup between two ladies trying to get back on the winning side of things. Another reason it's intriguing is Jessica Rose Clark lost her last fight via the armbar. Granted, that's the only fight that she's lost via the armbar, so not saying it's a continuous problem, but she might be facing the best women's MMA fighter currently on roster with the armbar. Julia Stoliarenko has 9 pro MMA wins. 6 of those are by armbar. So, coming off of the recency of this armbar loss that Jessica Rose Clark has, it might prove to be a thing that is not good for her. So hopefully she is able to keep this fight on the feet, as she is a pretty well-rounded fighter. She is a wrestler, but more of a ground and pound wrestler, but can stand up if needed. Granted, what I said, I think she will need to do that. Julia, if it wasn't obvious with her 6 armbar victories, she is a jiu-jitsu specialist, but at the same time does struggle to get the fight to the ground. Only a 12% takedown success rate, so that's obviously not that good. I like Jessica Rose Clark. She is experienced on the ground, so I do feel she will have good takedown defense and be able to find herself in better positions and not put herself in the position to get the armbar. I'm going Jessica Rose Clark to outpoint Stoliarenko and win by decision. That leads to Brad Tavares, the number 12th ranked middleweight, versus Dricus du Plessis. 2 guys that have not fought in very close to a year. They've both been fairly inactive. And when they fought, it was actually on the same night, again, almost 1 year ago, July 10th, 2021, they both fought. They didn't fight each other, but they both fought that night, both coming off of wins on that night, with Tavares coming in with 2 straight wins and du Plessis coming in with 4 straight wins, 2 of those coming in the UFC. Tavares does bring the UFC experience for sure. Facing some of the very best this division has to offer. Israel Adesanya, the champ right now, the former champ Robert Whittaker, and the former championship contender Yoel Romero. So he has faced some of the best fighters this middleweight division has ever seen, which should bode well for him in the long run. But Tavares is also a very well-rounded fighter. He can take the fight to the ground. He can keep the fight on the feet and use his striking. He also is very good against takedowns, which will prove to be a big advantage for him, as du Plessis is a tremendous wrestler. He can get the fight to the ground in any way. He averages about 3 takedowns per 15 minutes. Du Plessis has never gone the distance in 18 career fights. That's including losses. He's 16-2, never been to a decision. Du Plessis does have a great stand-up game too. I mean, he trains at K1 kickboxing, so he obviously has that a part of his games too. So best of the both worlds. I really like du Plessis in this fight. I think he is an absolute juggernaut. I think he's going to find himself in the rankings very soon, and this is a very good start. This might be what jumps him into those rankings with a win over, I believe Tavares right now is the number 12 ranked middleweight. I'm going du Plessis by 2nd round submission. That leads to Jessica Eye versus Macy Barber. Former championship contender Jessica Eye takes on, this is her nickname, I'm not calling her this, the future Macy Barber. This will be a ginormous opportunity for Macy Barber to live up to that nickname, as this will, if she is able to pull off the win, this will be the biggest win of her UFC career. Jessica Eye, though, has struggled immensely, only winning 1 of her last fights since 2019. Granted, those losses have all been against ranked flyweights and Valentina Shevchenko when she lost the title. She got a win versus Viviane Araújo, and then she lost to Cynthia Calvillo, Joanne Wood, and Jennifer Maia, all 3 in a row. But I think the hype behind Maycee Barber is legit, and I think she brings... And I like what she brings to the table, in all honesty. She's a great striker. She's very well-rounded. She can get the fight to the ground. Is just a little too one-dimensional for me. So I am going to go Maycee Barber by decision. And that leads us to a very good matchup between 2 ranked middleweights, Uriah Hall, the striking phenomenon. Uriah Hall is one of my favorite fighters to watch. Ever since The Ultimate Fighter, when he did that spinning back kick and broke the guy's jaw, I've always loved Uriah Hall. Takes on the jiu-jitsu master, Andre Munoz. Uriah Hall does bring a lot more UFC experience to this matchup, facing multiple former champions and even more title contenders to add to his resume. This will definitely be Munoz's toughest test to date, but he is also riding a 8-fight win streak, winning 5 fights in the UFC, and one of those came in the Dana White's Contender Series, finishing 4 of those fights via submission. I really think Munoz is a top 10 contender, and I think he proves that in this fight when he beats a top 10 contender in Uriah Hall by 3rd round submission. And that leads to a matchup between 2 absolute legends of the game, Jim Miller versus Cowboy Donald Cerrone. Whoever wins this fight will have sole possession for most wins in UFC history. Both are tied with Andrei Arlovski right now at 23. So very, very big implications when it comes to this fight too. These 2 guys' careers speak for themselves. Any casual viewer of MMA in the last decade knows who these 2 are. So I'm very excited for this matchup. There's not much more to say about these guys. They both obviously have well-rounded games as they've been around for so long. But I'm going to go with Jim Miller because this guy's still winning fights. He got a knockout in his last fight. Donald Cerrone has struggled a lot recently. Granted, versus a lot better competition. But right now, I think Jim Miller has the momentum. I'm going with Jim Miller by decision in this fight. That leads to the undefeated Irish striker Ian Gary putting his undefeated 9-0 record on the line versus the submission specialist Gabriel Green. Gabriel Green is an amazing grappler, but Ian Gary is great against the takedown. Ian Gary is leaps and bounds better in the striking department. I struggle to see Green keeping up in this fight whatsoever. I'm going to go with Ian Gary improving to 10-0, staying undefeated, and winning this fight by a 2nd round TKO. That leads to another fight between 2 UFC veterans, 1 UFC legend. No disrespect to Bryan Barberena, but Robbie Lawler, being the former champion, one of the best welterweights of all time, and has faced some of the other best welterweights of all time. Bryan Barberena, like I said, though, is no slouch. He's coming off 2 straight wins, including a win over the immortal Matt Brown, which was one of the most fun fights to watch those 2 going at it earlier this year. I think this fight is going to be very fun in the striking department. Both of these guys are tremendous strikers, and it will be very, very close. I got to go with the legend, though. Robbie Lawler, I think he's motivated as he feels he should be on the main card. He spoke out and said that he was very shocked to not see himself on the main card in this on this pay-per-view. But I think that's going to motivate him, and I think he's going to win this fight by decision just because both of these guys are tough as nails. I don't see either one being able to finish the other. So I see it going the distance, but I'm going Robbie Lawler by decision. And that leads to the premier prelim, which in all honesty might get jumped up, or one of these other fights might get jumped up to the pay-per-view. I was going to save it for when this fight was actually scheduled, go in order, but Lauren Murphy, we found out, did have to pull out against Miesha Tate. That fight was originally on the pay-per-view. I'm not sure, or last I heard when I was recording this, they're trying to find a short notice opponent for Miesha Tate. I don't know if they're going to be successful with that. I don't know what their plan is after that, if they're going to just reschedule this fight, or if what the plan is for Miesha Tate versus Lauren Murphy. But that fight is no longer on this card. So either this fight, I could see the Jim Miller-Donald Cerrone fight getting bumped up just because of the implications for it. But this, for now, is the premier prelim. The number 14th ranked lightweight Brad Riddell takes on Jalen Turner, who is very close to getting in those rankings. Both guys have been very successful as of late. Riddell is coming off of a loss. That was to Rafael Fiziev, who is headlining a fight night in a couple weeks. In a couple weeks now, under a couple weeks. And a top 10 contender. Before that, he was on a 7-fight win streak. Jalen Turner has now won 5 of his 7 UFC bouts, including his last 4. Both guys are fairly well-rounded, can win the fight on the feet or on the ground. I do see Riddell trying to keep it on the feet, though, a little bit more. He's been working on his Muay Thai a lot, where Jalen Turner, he practices out of Carlson Gracie's gym, so I do imagine that he's going to try to take this fight to the ground, especially with the much improved striking of Brad Riddell. I think this will be a very fun fight, a very tough one to call, I'm not going to lie, but I am going to go with Jalen Turner to keep the momentum going, and I do have him still winning by a TKO in the 3rd round. And that leads to our 4 main card fights that we have for now. Like I said, Lauren Murphy pulling out. We don't know what's going on with the Miesha Tate fight, or if they're going to move one of the prelim fights to the main card. But for now, the first fight on the main card, Pedro Munoz takes on Sugar Sean O'Malley. 2 guys going in completely different directions. With their career, Munoz has lost 4 of his last 5, where O'Malley has won 4 of his last 5, including his last 3. Munoz was a former legit contender in this bantamweight class, but has fell on hard times. O'Malley is looking to get up to that legit contender status. If Munoz can get this fight to the ground, I do think he will have the advantage there, but I really just don't see it. Sean O'Malley is on a complete roll. Pedro Munoz is on a complete downfall. Sugar Sean O'Malley has tremendous striking. I think he's going to end this fight fairly quick, too. I'm going 1st round KO, and O'Malley gets his first top 10 win, getting basically his biggest win of his career, and continues to climb the bantamweight rankings. And then next up we have what seems to be from the sounds of it, a number 1 contender fight in the middleweight division. Sean Strickland takes on the newcomer to MMA, Alex Pereira. For those that aren't huge UFC fans and are looking at the no ranking by Alex Pereira's name, he is a tremendous kickboxer. He's actually beat the champ Israel Adesanya in kickboxing twice. So he is the real deal when it comes to kickboxing. But he is fairly new to the MMA world. But it seems like the UFC is really pushing, hoping that they can get the Alex Pereira versus Israel Adesanya MMA matchup. But this is going to be a tough matchup. Sean Strickland is a huge test. He is very unorthodox. He doesn't really even seem to have a style. He just kind of, wherever the fight goes, he's fine with it. He'll take you to the ground. He'll brawl with you. Very unorthodox style, like I said. But Alex Pereira is just a technical master. He is unbelievable in the short MMA time that we've seen him. He has pretty good takedown defense too. I believe it's in the 70 percentile. I got to go with Pereira just because he's been so good in his few MMA fights. I like what I see. I'm going Alex Pereira by decision. That leads us to the co-main event of the evening, the trilogy between the two greatest featherweights of all time, Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway. Very interesting, as Volkanovski has won the first two fights. You don't see a lot of trilogies when one fighter won the first two, but the two biggest reasons this fight is happening again is because the first two were insanely close, unbelievably close. A lot of people think Max Holloway won that second fight, and Holloway is just the best, the next best, I should say. He's the only featherweight that has even competed with Alexander Volkanovski over an entire 5-round fight. And again, he did it twice. So I can see why they gave him this trilogy. It is very long awaited. I don't expect this fight to be very different in terms of excitement. I think it's going to be the exact same as they always do. Personally, I do want to see Max Holloway win. Max Holloway is one of my favorite fighters of all time. No disrespect to Volk. Volk is, again, the greatest featherweight of all time. I will not argue any skill level against Volkanovski. I like him too. Just always loved Max Holloway's style. But personal feelings aside, Volkanovski's won the first two fights. I don't see that changing in a third one. He's the greatest featherweight of all time. I'm going Volkanovski to retain his title, winning all three fights versus Max Holloway. He's winning this one by decision. And that leads to the main event, the middleweight championship on the line. Israel Adesanya taking on Jared Cannonier. Both of these guys are very good strikers and kind of fight the same, which kind of worries me because that means they're kind of both counter strikers. They wait for the other one to come at them. I'm hoping we don't get a repeat of Israel Adesanya versus Yoel Romero, but Yoel Romero also hits a lot harder than most middleweights. So I could see this fight being a little bit more active, but again, I am a little worried about the activity here. I do agree that Cannonier deserved the title shot. I can't sit here and say that I see him beating Israel Adesanya, though. Israel Adesanya is one of the greatest middleweights of all time. I have him number 2, right behind Anderson Silva. And, I mean, Cannonier hasn't beaten Whitaker, who Izzy has beat twice. The highest ranked fighter that Cannonier's beat is Derek Brunson earlier this year. The skill gap is just too big. I'm going Israel Adesanya, and I say he finishes this fight. Israel Adesanya by 4th round at TKO. But that is all I have for you this week. Action-packed show, like I said. Next week, I alluded to this earlier. We have the final 2 weight classes getting their playoff picture set in stone. The welterweights and the women's lightweights. In the PFL side of things, I will also be reacting to UFC 276 and giving my predictions for UFC Fight Night. RDA Rafael Dos Anjos versus Rafael Fiziev. So we got the battle of the Rafaels in the lightweight division. But until then, you can find me on Instagram at Monday Night Fight Talk. You can find me on Twitter at MN Fight Talk. Thank you all so much for listening. If you have any content ideas, again, I encourage you to comment on this video, shoot me a DM on Twitter or Instagram. I always love interacting with people. So if you have an idea, either it's quick and short and I can just reply in a comment or a DM, or I can add you to part of the show, do a little Q&A section that I would be happy to do if it's a little bit more of a longer answer. But until then, you can find me Tuesdays for all general sports topics, NFL, NBA, MLB, with a more focus on Seattle sports. I will be honest, it is mostly a Seattle sports, but we do venture off to entire leagues when needed. That's Tuesdays at 3:30 on Squabosa's YouTube channel. But if you are just an MMA fan, find me here, same place, same time on YouTube, 5 p.m. Monday evenings. Thank you all so much for listening.